I do this kind of work all the time, and you guys are gorgeous. I mean, this is amazing to have this many people in a room. It's mind-blowing. I wish you could see yourselves. And I want to thank you for having me, because it's really my pleasure to do this. I'm one of you. I'm down there doing this kind of work as well, so I feel that whatever I can offer back is always good karma points. And also, towards developing an artist community, which we understand is really the way any of us end up making it. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about what I'm going to try to accomplish. Fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to try to give you all kinds of hints and hopefully a little bit of insider information, and really a lot of organizing principles for you to manage doing packets of all kinds, whether they're grants or just a time to a gallery, and really professionalize yourselves. Okay, why is that important? Obviously, everybody's always known that you need to be professional in order to do this kind of work. But what many of you probably know, and those of you that don't know need to know, is that organizations have never needed you the way they need you now. So give Philip Hurts, little sideline there. But there are becoming fewer of them, but there are actually more of you almost every year. There are about 2,000 MFAs graduated every year. The pool of jobs they had the last CAA out in LA where I was, this past February was 150 jobs. So that's not really great news, although there are people, and I'm sure you've read, some folks like Jerry Sells have said this is actually a very exciting time because there are no rules left. So in a way, we're all liberated by the fact that there are no rules, and we're in this unprecedented time where you get to kind of redefine things because some of those galleries that never accepted you anyway don't exist anymore, or won't in the next 12 months. But so, without being negative, it's very important to understand that if you needed to be professional 5 years ago, you need to be twice as professional now. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to eliminate competition that could have been taken care of just by being smart, basically, just by being clean and orderly and smart and strategic about the way you do this. The first real distinction I want to clarify, because this is probably 30% of the issue in terms of how you will apply for things, is understanding the difference between cash awards that are restricted as opposed to unrestricted. A classic example of an unrestricted fund would be, for instance, New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship Program. It's a program that takes your images, your DVDs, your work samples, your resume, and your artist statement, and that's it, because you're being awarded on the merit of your work. Now, I'm not saying all of that is easy to put together. We're going to talk about how to put it together, but it's easier than, for instance, in this case, like a Fulbright traditional scholar, or another classic example would be creative capital. These are restricted funds, meaning that they're used towards some specific purpose, for instance, a project. So what they usually require you to do is a much more aggressive proposal where you would be describing the who, what, why, how, when, and where, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But you may even have to go as far as doing footnoting. I had to apply for a grant once that catered not just to MFAs, but people in the other humanities, and I actually had to provide a 10-page footnoted paper to them for my application. So it gives you a sense of how different the applications can be. They can be as simple as your work sample and statement, and as complex as a 30-page proposal in some cases. What are some of the other things you would be using your packet towards? Obviously, you'd be looking for galleries, festivals, fairs, whether they're commercial, not-for-profit. Doesn't really matter. It's the idea that you're getting your work out there in some way or another. And how do you get your work out there? Well, first of all, people have to see it, right? And they have to be able to understand it. So that's your job, is going to be to figure out ways to help people, even when you're networking, you're in a situation where you might run into a curator, you're available and able to hand over a packet of some kind or another and talk articulately about what it is that you do. Museums, obviously community spaces, public art programs, there's a huge amount of money, probably some of you right here are public artists, There's a great deal of money and some very exciting work to be done from the MTA to the Percent for Art programs. And they offer some very interesting, usually project-based, restricted funds, meaning that they're towards the purpose of making public art. But it's a whole arena that some artists literally dedicate their careers towards working in, the public art sector. Equipment access, which is a really fun arena. A classic example would be like Lower East Side Print Shop, where instead of a grant, they're actually giving you an in-kind contribution of equipment or space, and that's the space programs, that might be prohibitively expensive. So you tend to see these in photo, film, printmaking, papermaking, arenas where it's more difficult for artists to actually have studios of their own with the kind of equipment that's required to produce work in that either genre. And then, of course, residency programs. And one of the things that was also fascinating about NitroSource, besides learning a great deal about the amount of funding that's actually out there, which I'll ask you a fun question in a moment, was to find that residency programs actually constitute about 30% of what exists for artists. I'm sure each of you, by one degree of separation, knows somebody who's really on the residency circuit. And certainly at times of your life, when you're between things, sometimes people go from residency to residency. But the beauty of residency programs is they could be as little as 2 weeks or as much as 2 years. They also, just like a lot of what goes on in the funding and gallery world, they're very soup to nuts in terms of what they offer. Well, so this is usually my favorite part, because it's one of those things you can do for yourself so easily. And it has so much impact, and I'll tell you a couple of great stories about really how much impact it has, and it's the writing part. And there's nobody here who hasn't heard it's really important to write about your work, right? Is there anybody here who honestly believes that it's not important to write about your work? See, you guys are smart. You came here. We've already gotten that far, that you're mature and able enough to get here. So we can all agree that writing about your work is important. Why is it important? Well, we go back to one of my themes, which I want to turn into a positive, not a negative for you. If you have 1,500 applications, and you have artwork that's perhaps a little headier or a little more difficult to understand in the iteration you've provided on a DVD or in an image, what are the strategies you're going to employ to help someone get what you're doing? Your artist statement is going to be a first line of defense. Now, that's not to say the artist statement is always considered. It's not. But I have served on many panels. In fact, I just ran one with my students where the artist statement made the difference between who got the grant and who didn't, because the artist statement did its job, which we'll talk about right now. And the reason I love to share Yvonne McGinnis is because she's Cillian Murphy's wife, the actor Cillian Murphy, who probably many of you know. And even famous rich artists don't necessarily do good artist statements. So I just thought this one was particularly poor, and I thought I would share it with you. So recent works have been preoccupied with notions of portrayal of the self and with deception, dealing with the sublimated desire for self-expression of the artist and the tension between revelation and concealment. What does that tell us?